First, it's going to be our running back start-sit decisions. It seems like our listeners are always wanting these guys and then throwing even more in the comments. So don't just blindly throw a comment in. Let's wait and see if we talk about your guy. I'll preview it for you. We're going to hit on Duke Johnson, Jonathan Taylor, Darrell Henderson, Gio Bernard, and Damien Harris in this segment. Who knows? Maybe Stef will throw one on the end as well. Maybe not. We'll see. That's why you got to stay tuned. But Stef, first on the list, Duke Johnson going up against the Detroit Lions this week. Great matchup for running backs. He's the last man standing there for the Texans. Had a disappointing outing last week. Only 6.5 fantasy points, 10 carries for 15 yards. I won't take victory laps often. This is a guy that I did not like last week. You weren't huge on him, but we both agreed you could start him. But this was my fear. Just super inefficient. Deshaun Watson does not throw the ball to the running back position. He was actually pass blocking a ton because this Texans offensive line has struggled with pass protection. Steph, Duke Johnson against the Lions, what are you doing? Are you plugging him in or leaving him on the bench?
I'm plugging him in if I have to. I'm certainly not flexing him. I'll look at any other wide receiver, even like a waiver wide receiver like Jacoby Myers. I'd rather plug in than Duke Johnson. And I want to temper expectations on the ceiling. I thought he was going to be David Johnson plus when he came back, right? Take up all that volume that David Johnson was getting, something like 15 to 20 carries a game, plus all the receiving work that Duke was already getting when David Johnson was in the lineup. But it's just not panning out that way, even though the volume is there. Against New England in Week 11. Granted, New England was a tough matchup, and actually so was Cleveland. They have a pretty solid run defense. So the last 2 weeks haven't been the best matchups for Duke Johnson. The matchup against Detroit is what keeps him, we'll give him one more shot. If he disappoints against Detroit, I'm out. He's a bench guy, almost borderline droppable in a 10-team league or any league that's not PPR. But Duke had 10 carries, saw 5 targets, caught 3 of them for 20 yards. So he's doing what he's always done through the air. You just hope that he can be more efficient on the ground. But when he's running at 1.5 yards per carry,
tough.
It's absolutely brutal. The Texans' offensive line isn't doing him any favors either. You just hope that, put him in this week. Hope that he can be in that 12 to 15-point range. I'm not going to tell you, like I did earlier, that he could be a smash play closer to 20. I think his ceiling is 15, 16 points. Maybe he gets the touchdown in there that gets him to 20, but I'm not going to expect that in any circumstance because he just hasn't done it. Only has 1 touchdown on the season. Really isn't being used as a goal line back. They're just taking these 20-yard shots to Will Fuller. Brandon Cooks is taking them to the house. So they really haven't needed him. Even Jordan Akins and Darren Fells, these tight ends that they're using in the red zone, are all taken away from Duke Johnson. If maybe he was more of a goal line back, I'd be more excited, but the ceiling is nowhere near as high as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
but you can start him in a desperate spot.
I agree with you. And maybe by the time you're listening to this, you're watching him while you eat your turkey, so you can evaluate us on the spot with the kind of game that he's having on Thursday afternoon.
Turkey takes
here today. But look, Duke Johnson, 2.8 yards per carry on the season, only 1 touchdown on 80 total opportunities. That's just not going to get it done, especially when you have a rushing quarterback who likes to run around the goal line like Deshaun Watson. I'd say his touchdown opportunity is fairly low. It's always possible, but it's not as high as you'd like it to be for someone playing 77% of snaps. And the efficiency is just brutal. So, I think you're absolutely right. The ceiling is probably 15 points. If he gets 4 or 5 catches and can turn that into 80 to 100 total yards between his receiving and what he does on the ground, that's a great week here for Duke Johnson. The matchup is great. We saw Mike Davis have a nice game last week with P.J. Walker in an offense that we didn't really know a lot about coming into the game. We didn't know how it was going to look. They'd certainly put it to the Lions, so I think there's a possibility Duke Johnson does the same. If it's me, though, I'm really trying to leave him on the bench. Guys we talked about earlier, Melvin Gordon over Duke Johnson. Even Gio Bernard.
That was what I was going to bring up. We got a lot of questions on our live stream we did last Sunday. Hopefully we can do another one of those this week. So they'll hop on Sunday at like 9:30 or 10 o'clock. Answer those last-minute start-sit questions. But Gio Bernard versus Duke Johnson was a debate. There were guys on both sides. It seemed like a pretty polarizing one, which I wouldn't think for these handcuff running backs that there would be strong opinions on either side. I was leaning Duke Johnson just because of Deshaun Watson, just because of the offense. Who are you take of the two?
I actually think I would take Giovanni Bernard, which is sad because this offense could be atrocious. But I think Gio's passing volume is a little bit more guaranteed and the ceiling there's higher. Giovanni Bernard could get 8 targets in a game. I think Duke Johnson, the 5 targets he saw last week is like a best case scenario, maybe slightly above that. So I'll take Gio there. Steph, let's go ahead and talk about Giovanni Bernard. Let's skip ahead a little bit. Last week against Washington, only 9 carries, 18 yards. I see him very similar to Duke Johnson, actually, because they're both these backup running backs. The talent isn't top echelon. We know them as receiving backs, but they're getting work on the ground. Obviously, the offense for Duke is a lot better now that Joe Burrow is out. But Gio Bernard, not very efficient on the ground, but he is seeing targets through the air. Saw 5 targets last week, 7 targets the week before, turned each of those into 4 reception performances. Now with Brandon Allen, we don't know what that running back check down is going to look like. But I will say, I feel like typically you will see these backup practice squad level quarterbacks rely on short throws to the tight end. They rely on checkdowns to the running back. They want to get the ball out of their hands. They want to get the easy completions. Hopefully the coaching staff understands that too. I would expect 5 or 6 targets from Gio in this game, which gives him a pretty solid floor. I don't think the upside there. I don't think he's scoring a touchdown this week, but I think he can get you 10 points, and you'll be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, the matchup against the Giants makes him a little bit more appealing too. He's not an upside shot. He's definitely a floor play, but this running back landscape, 10-plus points is a big deal in a lot of lineups. Now, I did see that Gio did show up questionable with a concussion from Wednesday's practice.
Oh, wow.
If it's Samaje Perine in that backfield, do you have any interest at all?
No. Here's the thing. If it's Samaje Perine, you can probably expect 75% of snaps, but the whole argument against Gio is inefficiency, no touchdown upside. You're counting on that passing game work. Samaje Perine is Giovanni Bernard without the receiving game skill set. So if he plods for 3.5 yards a carry on 20 attempts, I'm still not taking 60 yards and no touchdowns at my running back spot. But again, desperate times call for desperate measures, but I would be avoiding that backfield if Giovanni Bernard is out. Steph, let's go ahead and move on to my Indianapolis Colts. Jonathan Taylor is back in the start.
He's back.
We never thought he would be in the start 6 segment. Found his way there by about week 7, and he's been lingering here for a while. Finally had a good performance last week. 22 carries for 90 yards. Also had 4 receptions in this game. No touchdowns, but he had a big one called back on a penalty that I do not think was a penalty.
The hold.
And then they had about 9 more holding calls after that. So 15 points on no touchdowns last week for Jonathan Taylor, 55% of snaps. I think it's all aboard the Jonathan Taylor hype train. If you were on the train before, you're certainly not getting off now.
It's tough, man.
Could be a trap.
With JT, it's the hot hand approach. Who knows? Next week could be a Nyheim Hines game. The week after that, we could be back to Jordan Wilkins if Jonathan Taylor disappoints. But I think the Colts have shown that they want to give Jonathan Taylor every possible chance. They would rather him be the hot hand and take over. The one thing we're not seeing is efficiency on the ground. The yards per carry has been abysmal. He's had a couple good ones here and there where he's had a few big runs. To your point, maybe that touchdown goes his way. Now we're talking about Jonathan Taylor in a completely different light. But I think he's a guy that's a low-end RB2, high-end RB3, flex name type of guy. You just have a floor there that's going to be there with all these running backs. A floor that you're going to see with Rojo and Fournette. A floor that you're going to see with Melvin Gordon, where it's these guys who are primary backs. They have the do-it-all skill set, but they just don't have the efficiency or the volume or the touchdown scoring that you need to take it over the top. But to see 4 for 4 through the air, Jonathan Taylor's actually been really impressive.
26 receptions on 27 targets. That is insane.
Very, very efficient, very, very productive through the air, which is something that we all didn't think. And I remember the CEH Jonathan Taylor debates that we were having was all about that. If Jonathan Taylor's going to be this Nick Chubb type guy, whereas CEH is going to be this
Kareem Hunt type guy.
Kareem Hunt, yeah, exactly. Where he's going to be a pass catcher, can get it done on the ground too. But been pretty impressed by Jonathan Taylor. That pass catching volume does give you a floor, and we talked about it when we just broke down Michael Pittman earlier. The matchups the rest of the way are great for Jonathan Taylor. Maybe if he had Pittsburgh coming up next week, I'd say let's pump the brakes before we plug him back in. Maybe it was just the Green Bay matchup. The Packers aren't known for being a great run-stopping team. But with matchups against the Tennessee Titans, Houston Texans, Las Vegas Raiders, and then the Texans again before Week 16. They do actually play Pittsburgh. I think you can plug in Jonathan Taylor in those situations if you have him. Could even be a buy low candidate if someone looks at him and says, I'm just trying to jump off the Jonathan Taylor hype train. Maybe you can grab him. I know trade deadlines are passed in a lot of leagues, or going to pass next week. But for JT, yeah, he's that low at RB2.
Yeah,
you can plug him in.
I'll take him over all these flex names we've considered on this list. I'll take him over Melvin Gordon, who we talked about earlier as well. I think Jonathan Taylor's moving his way back into RB2 consideration. We always don't want to overreact to 1 week, whether it's a positive or negative game. So let's keep an eye on it. But with these rookies, you got to hope that they continue to get that volume moving forward. So, Steph, let's move on to someone whose volume seems like it's moving in the wrong direction. It's Darrell Henderson for the Los Angeles Rams. We've seen a little bit of an emergence from Cam Akers. Malcolm Brown has stayed involved as well. Another three-headed backfield that feels absolutely disgusting. You don't even want to get anywhere close to it. Steph, what are we doing with Darrell Henderson? I'll tell you right now, after 8 carries for 5 yards, I'm staying as far away from possible. I mean, last 3 weeks, 8 carries, 7 carries, and 8 carries. Only, one reception, 2 receptions. Fell into the end zone last week against Seattle, or I should say 2 weeks ago. Unless he gets that touchdown, he is not startable. And even if he does, the ceiling is low. He actually kind of reminds me of Mark Ingram earlier in the season, where he's getting 8 to 12 touches, but you're banking on a touchdown to get to that RB2 level performance. I'm not banking on that with Darrell Henderson. I'm staying away from all of the Los Angeles Rams until further notice.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. You want to look at Darrell Henderson and look at some of the big games that he's had where he took over the backfield, was seeing 15 carries and has the do-it-all skill set. He has a workhorse back skill set. It sucks that he doesn't just get the reins of this backfield, because I think if he did, he'd be a very good fantasy option. He's seen 3 receptions, 4 receptions in a lot of these games. A worst-case scenario, he's getting only has 1 game where he doesn't have a reception. So he does have a little bit of pass volume. Think of like a Kenyon Drake, but if you take 10 carries a game away from Kenyon Drake, do you want to start that guy? No, you don't. So I'm sitting Henderson as well. Unfortunately, he was a guy that he had some pop. We all thought he had juice. We thought he could take over the backfield. And again, this Rams backfield, I see it all the time. It's begging for one of these running backs to come in here and take over. Hopefully it's Cam Akers in 2021, but for the rest of 2020, I think you got to avoid these guys like the plague. Almost dropped my iPad.
Nice hands there. Better than Nelson Aguilar. Let's move on to someone who we don't know if they have good hands or not, Steph, because they never throw him the ball. And it is
Great segue.
And it is Damien Harris for the New England Patriots with a staggering 4 targets on the season. What are we doing with him moving forward? He's got the Arizona Cardinals this week. Rex Burkhead is out for the season, so we're finally getting some clarity to that New England Patriots backfield. Sony Michel is the lingering shadow, though, where we don't know if he's coming back. He is. I believe he started practicing. He's been activated from IR. So now you go from Harris, James White, Burkhead to Harris, James White, Sony Michel. We saw the Patriots trail in that game last week against the Houston Texans, and James White got a ton of work in that game, that receiving role we've wanted him to have. In a game against Arizona, where I do expect the Patriots to need to put up points and where they could be trailing, first of all, let's talk about Damien Harris, and let's also talk about who would we rather have in this game, Damien Harris or James White?
I think I would go James White, especially if it's a PPR league. That's really the decision that comes. That it's
the table has turned once again on the Patriots. James White was left for dead not too long ago. Things change quickly, though, and I think I'm with you on that James White pick. The
crazy thing about Damien Harris is that he's not playing really any snaps at all. Only 38% of snaps in Week 11. His career high is 56% of snaps against Baltimore, where they were gashing Baltimore on the ground.
And there was a monsoon.
Had 120 games and 120 yards in a monsoon, but Damien Harris has been able to run pretty efficiently. It's kind of the when you see a mobile quarterback, we do get a bump for the rushing, the primary between the tackles, handed off on the ground running back. It's just tough because there is a world where Damien Harris only gets 10 touches, but then only puts up 50 yards, and that's his entire stat line. Yeah. So the floor is there. You do get that floor with a lot of other running backs that are out there. I'm not trying to start Damien Harris. I'm not flexing Damien Harris, but if I have to plug him in as my RB2 in a desperation situation, you have to do it. And that's really the case for all these guys that I think that we're talking about, where if you have to put them in your RB2 spot, so be it.
And I'm with you there. If I have to play Damien Harris, I will, but I'm trying to avoid it. I am willing to start James White as an RB2 in PPR formats this week. It's a deeper shot. It's a deeper name, but he was one of the bigger waiver wire pickups this week, I'm sure, and things have kind of changed for New England. Burkhead was getting receiving work. Now you kind of phase that work over to James White in a game where I do expect them to trail against the Arizona Cardinals. I do think they're going to pass the ball more than they would like to, and Cam Newton is willing to check it down to James White. So I think, Steph, let's talk about
Great
the name.
call.
I think the people want to know, where would we take Damien Harris compared to other names on this list? So I'm going to tell you Damien Harris, or first we'll start with Duke Johnson this week.
Duke Johnson, just for the pass catcher.
Damien Harris or Jonathan Taylor. That one's pretty easy.
Jonathan
it's JT.
Taylor.
Damien Harris or Darrell Henderson. I'm going Damien Harris on that one.
I think I am too. It does not feel great at all. I'd have to look a little bit more at the matchups. I know after Arizona, the Patriots do have some really, really good matchups, but I think for this week, we're looking at Darrell Henderson versus, who do the Rams play? San Francisco.
San Francisco, yeah.
Which it's still a tough matchup, not as hard as it was in 2019, but you're right.
Harris,
I think
yeah.
I would take Damien Harris as well.
And then Damien Harris or Gio Bernard. I'm going Gio Bernard.
Yep.